Okay, so I'm an attorney, which means I over-prepare. Everyone has a PowerPoint in front of them. I'm really going to follow this along, but I say that I've over-prepared because I will use about 5 minutes, maybe 6 minutes, and then I will turn it over for questions. And so you're welcome to ask me as many questions as you have. There's no way we're going to finish this. But the good thing is I already anticipated that, so I sort of broke it up into 2 presentations. In the second half, I really laid out word for word what I was going to say, so you could really read probably what I won't cover and know what I was going to say. I also do just want to use one quick second to give a plug for someone I saw here that I didn't realize I'd be seeing, which is Mike Crandall and Doyce Crandall. Our firm used Sandler because we have a bunch of attorneys who went to law school who don't know how to talk to people. And when you're trying to get a client, that's not helpful to not actually know how to know what a sale is. And no one in law school ever says you have to know a sales skill. It's not a class in law school. So it's been helpful to just learn how to have an intentional conversation. And when I say intentional, it's intended for a client to trust us. And just that simple thing of having an intentional conversation Sandler helped us with. And almost everyone at our firm has to go through at least foundations with Sandler, so we appreciate that. What I wanted to talk about today is most of our clients are, I should tell you, I'm not walking over here not because I don't like you, but I've been given specific instructions. I fall off the edge of that video cliff if I walk over there. What I want to talk about is most of our clients are self-employed or business owners, and I just wanted to talk about the realities of what we see as quickly as possible. So we, even my husband says, why don't we just stop paying our taxes and then have your firm settle it for us? You guys are always getting these $25 settlements when the client owed $144,000. Why can't we do that? Well, the reality is to get that, we actually have to only have $25 to our name. $25 either in the bank, or maybe that's the equity in our 401k, or in our house is underwater, our cars are underwater, all of that. So that's how those work. When you hear those commercials, pennies on the dollar, when I hear those commercials, I want to throw my TV out the window. Not because it's not possible, but because I think it's wholly misleading to make the public at large think they qualify for pennies on the dollar. Those deals do get approved. We had 3 approved last week, 3 offers and compromises for clients. One client got $25 on some liability that was in the thousands of dollars. But the reason is because they had no monthly disposable income, they had no equity and assets, they were renting their apartment, they had no vehicles, and even if they did, it would probably be underwater, no equity in it, and they had $25 in the bank. And the IRS said, we'll take the $25 in the bank and we'll settle this. And that's how it works. When the IRS recognizes that you have a tax liability, that the reality is you'll never be able to pay it back, they'll accept those types of settlements. The problem is, and this is how the IRS sort of created my industry, is that they don't just say, okay, you actually qualify for $25 and we'll forgive the rest. You actually have to hire representation or know how to do the appeals. So if a regular taxpayer files for, let's say, an offer and compromise, and you put on there $25, and for all intensive purposes, the code says you qualified. What'll happen when you apply is you'll get a rejection. Just like you will when you apply for Social Security, disability, or just like you'll get a rejection when you apply for veterans disability. That's just, and this is not an editorial on the government, that's just how the system is set up. It's a rejection and you have to appeal it. So then a lot of taxpayers hire firms like ours. We know the system. It's a maze, and when I say it's a maze, it's worse than those rat races that they give, those mazes they give to rats to study their brain. The maze of the IRS is baffling. I've had an offer approved where getting the offer approved means all the liens are released, and I've called the lien department and said, hey, your liens aren't released off my client. They've paid their offer in full, their offer's approved, their case is closed, and the lien department says, I don't see it in the system. And I said, well, can you just call the offer department? And I've had the IRS agent from the lien department say, no, that's not my job. So that's the type of nonsense you're dealing with these taxes. If you owe payroll taxes, it doesn't matter what amount. You can owe $10, you can owe $100,000. Payroll taxes are owed on your 941, Form 941, if you have any employees, and there's 2 parts to it. There's the part that's withheld from your employee's paycheck, and then there's a portion that you pay in it's often referred to as the matching portion. It's not actually a 50-50 match. But let's go with that. So the important thing is that part of it's withheld from their paycheck, part of it is what the employer pays in. Should your business not be able to pay its taxes, should your business even shut down, the IRS actually takes the portion that's withheld from the employee's paycheck and holds the officers of the business with check writing authority personally liable. So what does that mean? That means that now you're working at who knows where. The IRS comes after your paycheck, your personal paycheck, garnishes that paycheck for what's called the trust fund taxes. They call it trust fund because the IRS says that money was taken in trust from that employee to be sent to the IRS. That was the only thing that the employer was supposed to do, take it in trust, remit it to the IRS. So many of my clients say, I didn't even have the money in the first place. My customers weren't paying me. That contract fell through. The economy tanked. Frankly, I just wrote a net check to my employees. I never had that money. I never withheld it from their paycheck. The IRS says it doesn't matter if you never had it. It was either theirs or it was ours. So if you were going to give it to anyone, it was your employee. You should have given them their gross check and made them pay the taxes that they weren't withholding. Which we understand the IRS's position. It wasn't the employer's money not to give to the employee or the IRS. It was the employee's money that the employer didn't give to anybody. Does that make sense? So that's the trust fund. When a business shuts down, and I'll just say when the business shuts down, the most important thing you could do is file that final tax return. As soon as you decide to shut your doors, if that ever happens, if you have a business that 3 years ago you shut down and you haven't filed that final return because what does it even matter? The most important thing to do is file the final return, and the reason is this trust fund tax, the IRS only has 3 years to assess it to you personally. So that clock starts from when you file that final return. 3 years from that date, if the IRS doesn't assign a revenue officer to you, you may just get out of the trust fund completely. And we've done that. We had a client who owned a swimming pool business. As soon as he told me he was shutting down, I said, let's file the final return while you're even thinking about it. Let's figure this. We'll figure everything else out later. Let's file the final return. We got the final return filed. Sure enough, 3 years later, revenue officer never assigned. Trust fund's gone. We had negotiated everything else. The client actually walked away paying nothing, which he really didn't have anything. So that was a good situation for him. Flip side, it's completely arbitrary. I had a client in July who owes $76,000 in payroll taxes that he doesn't really owe. The IRS, he never filed his 941s because he didn't have employees. He didn't have employees, but the IRS decided he was mistaken and decided to prepare returns for him. They're called assessments. They used an industry standard for his industry. He's an attorney. They said, well, other attorneys in Oklahoma City pay this much on their 941s, so we're going to make assessments for you since you didn't file 941s. I called to clear it up in July 26th. I was actually looking at the case this morning. July 26th, they said, well, we need to get a revenue officer assigned to get these assessments taken out. I knew that could take 3 years. The revenue officer got assigned last week, which for me, I'm like, praise God, because now I can get those zeroed out and get rid of that $76,000, and my client can move on down the road and get all his liens released. The last thing I want to say before I finish is, if you owe any taxes with a business, the IRS assigns a revenue officer, which means it's somebody local. If you're in the Oklahoma City area, it's going to be a revenue officer out of the Oklahoma City office, which is downtown on Robinson, right next to the Colcord building, Robinson and Maine. That person will be very aggressive. They may, and I don't say this to scare you, I say this to tell you, don't let them psychologically mess with you. They may sit outside your house all night long. They may follow you around. They may go in the bank with you. I had a revenue officer that I filed a complaint on, but I'm complaining to the IRS, so what do you think happened with that? Nothing. The revenue officer sat outside my client's house. The next day we had a meeting with him to have a trust fund interview. They have to have these interviews if you owe payroll taxes. The meeting starts with us sitting down in the IRS small room. The revenue officer says to my client, first words out of his mouth, does your girlfriend know you're cheating on her with that blonde that slept over last night? And I said, I object. I'm taking my client out of here. We stepped in the hallway and I said, frankly, I don't care who's sleeping over your house, and it's irrelevant to the taxes that you owe. You just need to be honest about the questions he's asked. I've already told you the questions he's going to ask. There is not anything any information that he knows that is that you need to worry about twisting and turning. Just let's be honest and provide the full story of what happened and why your business has failed. And I complained on it. I filed a TIGDA complaint. It's Treasury Inspector General of Tax Administration, who is run by IRS employees. And I kid you not, 2 years later, after the complaint, the IRS called me and said, there's been a TIGTA complaint filed against you. And so we had a 30-minute conversation, and then I said, is this the TIGTA complaint that I filed against this revenue officer? And then she looked at it and she's like, oh, I'm sorry. Yes, let me call the revenue officer. Nothing's happened on that. So, unfortunately, there are a lot of problems with the IRS. I have applied to be on a committee in Washington, D.C., which we'll see because the email I sent says the IRS doesn't care who you are, but we do. So we'll see if I get on that committee. But the reality is there's a lot of problems with the system, and unfortunately, the IRS system is set up such that you need to know specifically what you're doing. So if you do have a tax liability, I'm more than happy to provide free help on what form you have to file, how to get what you need done. What I will say is that anticipate months, if not years, of rejections to get the right thing done.